Hey there, everyone. I'm Kevin Griffin, the author of the best-selling course SignalR Mastery on Udemy. And today is a special treat for everyone on YouTube and the folks already in SignalR Mastery. We're talking to my very good friend Brady Gaster, who is basically the guy currently in charge of the future of SignalR. And we spent about an hour talking about the past, how SignalR even became a thing, to where we are today, the current state of SignalR, and what's some of the future things that we can actually talk about. The great thing I love about this interview is that we really hit a couple of the key details of why SignalR even had to become a thing to begin with. How has it made developers' lives easier? And then we talk about some unique use cases where SignalR has really come and saved the day. So those of you out there who are wondering, what do I even want to use SignalR for? Pay attention to the later part of this interview because we go into a lot of really niche scenarios where SignalR was the perfect fit. So that's enough from me. Stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy this interview. And if you're not already, please sign up for SignalR Mastery, and I'll see you there. Take care. Hi, everyone out there. This is going to go out to the folks in SignalR Mastery, and we're also going to put this up on my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in SignalR, you should definitely go check out SignalR Mastery. But that's not what we want to talk about today. We want to talk to my very good friend, Brady Gaster. How are you, Brady?
I'm doing great, man. How's it going? Long time no see.
I know. We were just chatting about how long it's been since you defected to the West Coast.
Yeah, exactly.
And you said it's been about 10 years now. But so, Brady, you're a I'm going to try this in one shot. Principal Program Manager for the Azure Developer Experience team.
Yeah, which is a really long way of saying I work on the ASP.NET team.
Excellent. All right. ASP.NET, one of my favorite technologies. It's made me a very successful person over the past 10, 15 years, which is about how long I've known you. I mean, we met in what, 2007, 8?
It was something like that. I was still in Richmond, Virginia, I believe at the time. I think had already left Richmond at that point. I used to live in Richmond. You and I both know Steve Presley. That's kind of how we got connected. And I used to do a lot of advocacy work and evangelism work throughout the Mid-Atlantic area. That's how I know a lot of people back there. You were running, I was just thinking about this earlier, and I cannot remember the name of the Hampton Roads conference that you were working on. What was that called?
Back then, it was Mad Expo.
Mad Expo, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Because I had Mad Expo in 2011, 2012. And then took a couple years off, and then we did Revolution Conf later. A couple of years ago, we had 4 instances of that, and
that's cool.
So yeah, we've known each other forever, and like all good people I know, they eventually go to work for Microsoft. So that's what I tell all my friends. Like I know a lot of people in Microsoft, but I knew them before they went to Microsoft.
Right.
And that makes them the best friends because
that's cool.
I'll tell friends and clients, I know a guy. Like, let me send an email. Let me just touch base with someone. I'll have an answer for you later.
Oh, we still do that internally. We just say, hey, let me go talk to Scott, and they presume it's somebody important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
Scott or Jeff, right? It's usually
Scott or Jeff.
Yeah. It's always someone important.
Exactly.
So I wanted to bring you on because you work with obviously one of my favorite technologies to come out of the ASP.NET team. That's SignalR. And I know that specifically because you were working with SignalR very early. Like a lot of us, you were in the early open source stages working with the preview bits before it ever became a core part of ASP.NET. Now you actually have the benefit of a little bit more insight of the history of how SignalR kind of got started because you work with David and Damien. Do you mind talking kind of about that early history?
Oh, absolutely not. I'd love to. And it's funny to talk about that early history now. And it's interesting when I talk to folks who, I don't want to say any names, but I was talking to a gentleman the other day who I think he's been at Microsoft a year and a half, 2 years. He's probably been coding 5, 7, maybe.
Yeah.
So he's been coding since we started rewriting SignalR for .NET Core, which I'll talk about later is like a big thing. That was a huge deal. So when you and I started, messing with SignalR, it was still in an ASP.NET framework, still Windows dependent, yada, yada, unless you were doing mono. And it was also very, very necessary when we started working with it back then, because WebSockets were not yet a ubiquitous thing.
Yeah.
So the way I used to introduce it, it kind of made things difficult for me. It's really hard to give a SignalR presentation these days because you can't really talk about it like as romantically as it used to, because now people don't really think of HTTP as a stateless protocol anymore because of things like SignalR.
Yeah.
And WebSockets is like more ubiquitous, but back in the day, it was really important because David and Damien were, thinking, I hate having to hit F5. Every PM of every project that's in a web browser says, well, they don't want to have to hit the F5 button. They want to know when the database gets updated automatically. So, they couldn't depend on WebSockets because it wasn't really ubiquitous yet. So what they had to do was to build SignalR, which you talk about well in your course.
Yeah.
And then how it will try WebSockets first. And if it doesn't work out, it will back off and try, long polling or whatever else, or server sent events and then long polling and then go from there. So that was really helpful because the SignalR APIs, as you know, are essentially send, invoke, and on. About as simplistic as you can get. And, at the time, if you wanted to program against a raw WebSockets API, it wasn't easy. If you wanted to write polling logic, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
So with SignalR, you write to this one API, and, once your platform begins to support WebSockets, boom, it just works. Not to mention the fact that whenever something comes out, it still hasn't yet. If I listen back on those old presentations, I think that the time has already passed that I predicted.
Yeah.
But WebSockets is still the thing. Like you could argue gRPC, but that's not a transport, that's a tech. If you can imagine, us predicting that WebSockets is the last real-time tech, it's not going to be. So there'll be something beyond that, and hopefully we'll have time to implement it in SignalR. And when we do, you'll just continue to use your SignalR APIs and it'll keep working. So, when it first came out, we were all like, whoa, that is amazing. Like, and everybody just jumped on it, so, but it's evolved quite a bit.
So. My first introduction to WebSockets was a Mix conference in 2011. Yep. I went to a session. So anyone out there watching, if you've never had the opportunity to go to Mix, it was the least Microsoft conference I think I've ever been to, because it was bleeding edge web tech, just standards. It was all browsers talking about the future of web development. And there was a gentleman there, and I wish I had the memory to remember who it was. But he was talking about WebSockets, but he was talking about WebSockets in more of this abstract idea. And he went to show an example, but he had to use a nightly build of Firefox. And that was the only build he had that would support real WebSockets.
Yeah.
And then he had to do this other demo of the show. All right, if you wanted to use this in IE at the time, or even Chrome, or just regular Firefox, he said, all right, I have a Flash plugin that acts as a proxy for a WebSocket. So JavaScript talks to the Flash plugin talks to the web server, and that emulates the WebSocket. And it quote, works really well. I remember sitting in the audience go, that sucks. I don't want to do that. And fast forward a year or two, like WebSockets became a thing in most browsers.
Yep.
Like not like IE for obvious reasons, but IE 12 eventually.
Right.
And we hit this conundrum of like, all right, I would love to use WebSockets. WebSockets are the ideal way to solve this problem, but none of my customers use the new build of Chrome or Firefox. I need to be able to support WebSockets plus something else that would work just as well.
Right.
And SignalR came at the right time to kind of hit that sweet spot of, I'm running against one API and I don't need to worry about the implementation underneath the scenes. SignalR does that for me. And that's what really got me hooked, because I wrote a demo and showed it off to a client, and it was like, there's so much magic underneath the scenes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
even
Damien used to joke about giving SignalR demos. He used to make me sad, the jokes he would tell, but he would make comments about, it's pretty easy to give an amazing SignalR demo. You know what I mean? Because nobody expects to see what they end up seeing, and it makes everybody go, huh, I didn't think you could do that. So, yeah.
I remember we used to, like our little core group of SignalR folks at the beginning, we had some really amazing demos.
Oh yeah. It was
My
crazy.
favorite I think I ever did, I was working with Component One and I did the Twilio call-in voting app. And so you would text message some number and vote for like pie, cake, or bacon, I think it was.
Yeah, yeah.
And it would update a graph real time on the projector.
Yeah.
And, like everyone, that was a demo. People would just go, "That's really cool," but it was like 4 lines of code. Like,
oh yeah,
I'm exaggerating, but it wasn't that much code to do all that work.
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably had 4 lines of code to make your connection, and then you probably had 1 method handler to handle your events. Exactly. I remember that code. I copied that demo quite a few times. I think John Galloway and I actually, in one of our SignalR shows on Channel 9. I remember very well. Didn't you do that with what's his name? Devin. Didn't you do that with Devin?
I don't remember if Devin was involved in that, but that sounds like something Devin would have been in. Such a long time ago, it's hard to remember those details.
It is.
Yeah.
I think I've had quite a few fun ones. I think what was really funny was the first time, and if you go back and you watch the show, you'll see that I was a nervous wreck. Yeah. Absolutely losing my mind. It's a long story I won't bore everybody with, but when I first started at Microsoft, you can hear my accent. I lived in North Carolina at the time, and I was flying back and forth. And like essentially, like Brady's schedule was fly to Redmond, go to Channel 9, record, sleep, preview, fly. Because I would just have to come out here and just burn through a bunch of shows. And scheduling them was not easy because devs are busy. So, and they would always randomize at the last second. They'd have to go here. Oh, I have this review I didn't know about. This popped up, whatever. So I would usually stack them too. So when I got David and Damien to sign on to do a show, I was over the moon, super excited. And a lot of people know this about me because I've run laps around people before. I'm deaf in one ear. So I have to stand on one side of, the left side of people when I'm interviewing them, or I can't hear the answers to the questions. Yeah. Especially with like studio noise and whatever else. So for this particular one, I stood between David and Damien. And before I came to Microsoft, I was working on like my very first SignalR demo ever. I had this crazy idea where like the dog would always set off the alarm in the house. And I was like, somebody should solve this problem. This isn't complicated. Actually, it is really complicated, but hey, I've got a Connect, and the Connect could solve the problem. So I created this thing called, so silly to look back on it, called the Connectonitor. And what it would do is it would always run. And when you turn it on, it would start to track skeletons in the room. And if it knew that it was during a range of time where there should not be a skeleton in the room, it would like start taking pictures and send the pictures through Service Bus and SignalR and whatever else to my phone. And I was interviewing David and Damien, and it was really funny. Like they hadn't really met me yet. I was brand new, you know what I mean? Nervous as heck. They were like, "What's wrong with this guy?" And we're talking about crazy demo ideas. I think Damien did his move shape demo. My mouth hit the table, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing!" And now I've got my own move shape demo. But we were talking about crazy demos that we've seen people do, and Damien was like, "So this guy did this demo out there with a Connect, and it was like taking pictures and like watching for skeletons and like showing it on screen and all this stuff." And he looks over at us, and David looked at him, and he was like, "That was him." It was pretty funny. So that was like the really, really fun show to do with them. And then we did it later on. I think it was like 9 years later I think it was like the same week, Cecil recorded me. So I had to like come up with some wowie demo. So I did the demo where I kind of connected to my sampler and like made a bunch of noise. And we did the same thing with Damien. I like to do a lot of music demos with SignalR. I've built a theremin before. I've got a new idea of the theremin coming up soon to talk to my Moog sense over here. I have a show on one of the advocacy, interview on one of the advocacy shows in a couple of weeks. I think it's on May 5th or May 7th. And I want to do a music demo in that. So if people want to check it out. I like coming up with those kinds of things because, you know, I'm picked on a bunch about this by the SignalR Army. I refuse to do a chat demo.
Yeah.
It is the most ubiquitous demo you could do with SignalR, but like everybody does that. So like Kevin and I made a deal years back, no chat demos, unless you just can't come up with anything else. So he's always coming up with wild ideas. Another one is mapping. Mapping is really fun. Like live mapping with SignalR, you can do crazy stuff with that. So I think you did a version of that too, didn't you? Or was that?
Probably did.
Yeah. Where people were.
I would have done. Map components.
I think I actually stole your demo and I had people text me, or I had people text a number, and when they would text it, I would show them on a map.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a demo we would have come up with.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Because you would have gotten the city state or country
I would grab the city
of someone and go, all right, you're here. And then show everyone on a map. Yeah, that would have been a great demo.
Yeah, we've done some stuff like that. I've got one that I did with Glenn Condren called Dispatcher, which was like essentially like a taxi dispatch service. Yeah. We talked about that early in the 3.0. We wanted to make kind of a canonical 3.0 demo. It ended up being the weather one, which is really good, and like the Blazing Pizza stuff. Mm-hmm. We had talked about doing like kind of this dispatch demo, and then we started thinking, how do we route? And then it was like, we're not doing a dispatch demo. Like, forget it. Routing is too hard.
Yeah. So what's funny is we talk about no chat demos, but I actually have a client I had to write chat features for.
Oh yeah, cool.
So I've done that with multiple rooms, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And I've done that so I can tell people not to do that. Because it's not fun at all.
It's not fun.
Because what was the early SignalR demo was Jabber. Like Jabber was the chat room to end all chat rooms. Yep. In SignalR, you never had to write your own ever again.
Yeah, it was like an IRC client. David's talked about redoing Jabber, but I just glare at him and I'm like, no chat demos.
there are so many just other use cases I think make sense for people to kind of get the idea.
Dashboarding, live dashboarding. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff. I mean, chat really is like the slam dunk demo. It's like you send a message, somebody gets the message, you're done here. You know what I mean? Have you seen the streamer demo? That's probably like the new canonical demo. The one where, let me see if it's still online. Is streamer still up? Streamer.azure websites. Sorry for the clickities. It's still up. So, and see, I could show this later. So I'll give you this URL.
Okay.
Go to StreamR. You know how to spell any demo with SignalR.
StreamR. Yep.
StreamR.azurewebsites.net.
Oh, okay.
Did it pop up?
Yep.
Oh, wait. Just don't hit it yet. Just sit there for a second. So watch this. So I'm going to hit start streaming. I'm going to hit allow. And now let's see if it starts working. It might not work since I've got my camera on with the thing, but like what it does is it takes a picture of my, I don't know if it's working because I'm using my camera here.
Yeah.
But what it'll do is it'll capture your camera and take your image and convert it to ASCII.
Okay.
And then real time bounce that ASCII back to the server. And then that will hub it out back to all the clients and you can actually see yourself in ASCII moving around.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, my camera's being used by Zoom right now. So.
All right, so I didn't screen share. I was going to screen share, but I didn't see the movement. So
that's okay.
All right, I'm going to keep a note of that one. We'll put that one into resource.
You should. That one's on GitHub. We actually took. There's a clone of that demo that has not been pull requested back to the main repo yet. That involves a rear camera version too. So there's actually a second version of that demo, but we haven't been able to get the pull request in. It was kind of how Brennan Conroy on the team, one of the devs on the team, kind of showed off how to do streaming. Now our streaming APIs with like iAsync and Enumerable,
Yeah.
you know, they're a lot better than they were because we didn't have it before. I've asked the devs to kind of like make the streaming API a little bit more elegant. I'd love to do something like that in .NET 6, pardon me.
So it's funny you mentioned that. That's a topic I have on the slate for SignalR Mastery, but I haven't done yet.
Okay.
Because the APIs are not as like fluent as the rest of SignalR.
Got it.
I know how to do it. I've done a demo in it before, but like so much of SignalR Mastery is creating that narrative of how can I take someone from nothing to getting the concept and everything in between. I haven't been able to do that with streaming yet. I'm still on the cutting room with that idea.
We should talk more about that and about other things in there. One thing I would love for you to do is so people ask this question a lot, so I'll go ahead and kind of get into this too. Like, what do PMs at Microsoft do? It's a really long list. Okay, so like my list is I PM SignalR, but that's not a full-time job. I mean, it just isn't. The devs do a great job of making sure SignalR continues to not hit the floor. We PMs kind of drive the vision and like, fight with other PMs to get dev resources and this kinds of things, or collaborate with other PMs. But the other thing I do is I'm kind of an Azure person. So one of the things that I'm responsible for is to continually look at the different experiences that .NET developers and specific to .NET developers. Nothing against single languages. We have other PMs that do those. But to look at the experiences that .NET developers have on Azure building their applications. So I'll pick on one thing that you and I talked about earlier, application insights.
Yep.
We're working closely with the application insights team because they have a lot of ways for you to filter traffic out. And when you're using SignalR and I think it's only an app service, but when you turn on application insights, since you've got that WebSocket connection, it looks like a slow request.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's one of those things that just, if you're using SignalR, you've got a long running connection. Application insights sort of like when you're looking at the report, it looks like you've got a slow request. People that use SignalR, they're like, oh, that's my SignalR connection.
Yeah.
So if you don't like seeing that, or as some customers have, they might have an alert. And that alert will sound if they have more than 5 slow connections in an hour.
Yep.
Guess what? SignalR is going to be one for the whole hour. So your alarm's just going to go off. You know what I mean? So there are ways that you can implement filters, pardon me, in the application insights, client SDK, a great SDK. There's a way that you can use filters to kind of turn that off. But as you and I talked about, like sometimes you'll lose some stuff you wanted. You know what I mean? So we're working closely with the application insights team to, make sure that doesn't happen anymore. That takes collaboration between us. Like maybe we send them a special header and that header just goes, oh, it's a SignalR connection. Not going to light it up is like a long running thing. So, like teams have to collaborate, like when you've got a cloud and you got all these services. But it's a continuum. You know what I mean? The other thing we're doing for 6 right now is we're working on a native C++ client. That native C++ client will enable people who want to build C++ applications like the Windows team, or people who want to build something in Objective-C, for instance. We've had a lot of folks ask for a Mac client. Mm-hmm. We've already got 4 or 5 clients, and every time we change something in SignalR, we have to change all of the clients. So it becomes a very expensive, maintenance thing. So we asked the community, like, should we do a Objective-C or what's the other one, Swift client? Yep. And if I asked 100 people, I would get 50 on one side and 50 on the other side. It's very strange. And of each set of 50, 48 of them would say, I will not use the other one. So, and then there's like 4 really reasonable people that are like, it's okay. But we have talked to Objective-C folks who've said, if you gave me a C++ client, I could, I guess, cross compile it. I'm not a C++ person, so I don't know. So we're putting that option out there for folks who want to do the native dev, which there are a lot of people who want to do native dev. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of internal teams who want to do native dev. So the fact that we're giving them a native client for SignalR is going to get a lot of people out of jail, which is really good. The other thing it does, like I said, is if you want to do any kind of a different native client like Rust or iOS or whatever, now you can take that C++ one and you can do whatever you need to with it.
Yeah.
That's been the major scope of work we've done for this round of release. We're also making things like, it's the one thing I told you about earlier. Token refreshing. Today, you would have to do a bit of work. Tomorrow, you will have to do less work. We'd like to get it to a point where you have to do no work. But SignalR is, between the framework implementation and the core implementation. Quick little history lesson here. Between those two implementations, we just said we're gonna start over.
Yeah.
So we literally started over, and the first thing we did was what anybody should do when they're building something that runs on top of WebSockets. We wrote our own protocol. Mm-hmm. So there's actually a SignalR protocol that's documented that we've had people actually use to do things like write Go clients for SignalR or Python clients for SignalR, et cetera, et cetera. Like once you've got the protocol, you can write a client for it.
Yep.
So
I watched David write a Go client in DC London last year.
Yeah.
Last year. And that was amazing. I was like, all right, that's cool. And then he wrote like a mini version of like Azure SignalR service. Like what if you had a local Azure SignalR service?
Right.
And I really appreciate how open the team is with all these different protocols, because I tell people all the time, and I think I talk about it in the course, like, all right, there are certain clients available, but if you're working Fortran, I don't know, pick something, and you need a client,
Rust,
go grab the spec, and you can technically write your own, and it'll talk to any server that's out there.
Pretty much. Any core server. Any core server.
Well, so let's talk about that for a second. That was a big change going from .NET Framework to .NET Core.
Mm-hmm.
And SignalR did not come along for that ride initially. I don't think SignalR was officially in the box until 2.0.
Correct. I think it was 2 or 2.2. Yeah. Mm-hmm. A lot of that was situations like there were things in framework. Your course really focuses on core, right?
It's all core. Yeah.
It's all core. That's what I thought. In framework, there were some things we were doing. Like SignalR was kind of a stab at like doing distributed programming or distributed async programming with ASP.NET Core.
Yep.
Anytime you see a first or a second attempt, you should know things are going to change. You know what I mean? So when we did SignalR, we learned some lessons. One of the lessons was replaying. We tried to do the nice thing by queuing everything up if your client disconnected and then replaying all the messages. What happens when you queue something up and nobody reconnects? You flood the server. You know what I mean? So it's not that it floods, but it's just the memory pool would get pretty large. And we did some, optimizations and improvements there, but the bottom line was in framework, we really tried to do more work for you than we probably should have been doing. Yeah. We call SignalR because accents, but it's really SignalR. It's not SignalR plus ORM plus every decision you need to make for you. You know what I mean? It's not that. It's really just the thing that sends the signal. So if you want to talk about things like ordering, if you want to talk about things like hacking, if you want to talk about those sorts of things, those are things that you have to implement yourself. You know what I mean? SignalR is as durable as is the underlying connection. In the old days, we tried to account for that by queuing everything up and then replaying it. We don't do that anymore. But what we did do was, I guess it was in a 3-wave, we added with automatic reconnect. Yes. Which will reconnect your client and it will give you events to handle to like on reconnecting, on reconnected, those sorts of things, so that you could tweak your UI as it's going. And I won't do it today, but I've got a demo I should send you that kind of walks through those 4, the 4 pillars of SignalR. My version of MoveShape, Damien's is better, but I should send you that. I'm gonna pull that out into its own little demo so people can redo it. But it's kind of wrapped up in a dev intersection thing now, so I'll pull that out so it's all by itself.
One feature. So you talk about automatic reconnect. which you could have written yourself in Framework because we had the events for it. The event that didn't come over from Framework to Core that I kind of wanted was slow detection. I don't remember how Framework would do it, but it would tell you if you had a slow connection. I don't remember what the algorithm for it was, but that event never came over to Core.
We should talk. You should file an issue. I'd love to get an issue on that and see if it's been asked about before. Okay. I never used that in Framework, so
we had one client where we would throw up a yellow warning sign. It's like, all right, you're potentially not getting all the messages in order. You're not disconnected, but something's wrong. And I don't remember how SignalR would detect that, but I remember that being a message or an event you would get. So I never used it.
Yeah, I was at the PM then, so I didn't use it.
So I'll make a note of that because I'm just curious.
I'll have to ask about that in triage today.
Yeah, it was slow connection, I think was the event. And it was basically you're still connected, but maybe something's wrong in between.
Starting to wonder if the reason we didn't bring that over was we knew how many messages were getting stacked up because we were stacking them up. And maybe now since we're not stacking them up, we don't know anymore. This is the ballpark. Like I said, it's the first time I've heard of that. I never used it. But like I said, I mean, like that, you asked like, why was there a delay? Well, we were working on the protocol before we worked on the clients.
Yeah.
The other thing is that there were, with decisions as big as should we replay or not, we argued a lot. Like I joined the team right after that dropped. So I came back to the team in October 2018. I've done 2 stints on the team. The second one was when I became the SignalR PM. And that's really doing the team a severe disservice. Like they've really policed themselves and they've really done a great job of managing themselves. Like it was a very dev driven effort by a bunch of devs who really cared about it the way you and I cared about it. It was just something that they had to bite off once time permitted, you know what I mean? And that's what I came around to.
There was a really good stopgap between, it wasn't right as Core dropped, but somewhere between Framework and SignalR Core for Core. I think it was David dropped basically a set of libraries that would work on Core,
right,
and use the original JavaScript clients and I don't think it used the proxies, but it could talk the language and actually push that in production for our clients.
Oh, cool.
We really wanted to get them over on Core as soon as possible. And the big change, I remember the big change was Framework would use one WebSocket for all hubs.
Yeah.
And then when the bits for Core dropped, it was now a dedicated WebSocket per hub.
Right.
Not a big deal, except I had 5 hubs on this one page.
Right.
And I remember pushing out Core and my app kept crashing because I was using my socket pool. And but I was in Azure, so I just scaled up a bunch of instances and tried to load balance it as much as I could. Yeah. And then I just went back on our refactored hubs and took 2 or 3 of them out.
Got it. Yeah, when in doubt, scale out.
yeah, thanks for scale out. It took me about 2 weeks to get everything solved.
Right.
But it was a bunch of hair pulling because it would crash.
Yeah.
Restart itself, and I had no idea why. And
interesting.
App Insights didn't help at all back then. But the Azure Health Wizard, whatever it was, 5 so years ago, it kept every now and then would come up and say connection pool exhausted. My connection pool exhausted. Why? How does that even happen? Oh,
okay. Yeah. I get it.
Because we might have 1,000 people on the site, but each of those 1,000 people have 6 or 7 tabs open each.
Yeah.
All with 5 WebSockets going to them.
Right.
And I think I talk about that in the course because that was a pain point for me.
That's a pain point. It's funny you talk about that. There's all these things that it's funny you're talking about this. I'm looking at your course now. I was looking at your course, and one of the things in there, you talk about message sizes. So, and you had asked me earlier to talk about some customer stories. So I'll talk about anonymous customer stories.
Yeah, let's talk about, so basically let's frame it as people ask about uses of SignalR in real life.
Right.
Not chat apps, but
Right.
like real life examples.
Right.
So I asked you if you had any good stories for external customers, being as broad as possible.
Sure.
And then there's also a lot of internal uses of SignalR. So I'd love to talk about that.
Well, I talked about Windows.
Yep.
You know, Windows is all native code. Windows uses SignalR. I don't want to be very specific about what feature it is, but they're just because I don't know if it's completely out yet. I've seen the curves of the releases, and it's getting out there. But I do know that Windows uses SignalR. There are some gaming crews who use SignalR and who want that native client for obvious reasons. Games are faster when they're done with native code. I'm trying to think of the video calling application that we are not using right now uses SignalR. The one that I'm on all day, Teams. Teams actually has SignalR in a couple of places. As you heard in Satya's keynote a couple of weeks ago, when he talked about Microsoft Mesh, Microsoft Mesh is powered by Orleans and SignalR, or as Diego likes to say, Orleans. I like that better.
So real quick, for folks who are not familiar with Orleans, what can give kind of the gist of what Orleans is? Sure,
I can give you the gist of it. Orleans is Microsoft Orleans is a virtual actor framework, and that's really I hate calling it just that because it does a little bit more than that. Most actor frameworks tend to do a little bit more than just be actor frameworks. Ruben Bond has a series of really awesome presentations around Microsoft Orleans and what it's used for. I like Orleans because if you think about sort of I'm gonna get in trouble for this. If you think about some of the early goals of SignalR being like kind of that piece of the puzzle that you do like distributed programming with, you know, ASP.NET Core. I've actually been experimenting using Orleans in that way. And what I like is, you know, one of the things that we talk about is, you know, SignalR is as durable as the connection. If you go into a tunnel, like that, bad things are going to happen. So I tell people like use SignalR when, you know, that durability thing is like not a problem. When you're talking about background services, like, you know, huge, you know, asynchronous processing and whatever else, that's when like I've been like looking at using Orleans and like experimenting with stuff there. That's what a lot of folks use it for. Halo uses it for that. Microsoft Mesh uses it for that. So if you think of like an iceberg metaphor, you think about like all your ASP.NET apps are kind of in that middle zone. The stuff connecting all those ASP.NET apps is the Orleans stuff in the back, like all the asynchronous processing. And whenever you're popping messages up to the clients, that's SignalR. Dan Rosanova, colleague, ex-Blue Badge, he used to kind of refer to SignalR as like, this is a Dan term, not a Brady term. I'm going to put that out there. He kind of talks about how SignalR is a last mile technology. So, but you know, he's also a messaging cat. So like he loves talking about messaging, Kafka and all that stuff, same things, Orleans and all those things. But if you think about having like a dashboard or a monitor where you want to see what's going on, like surfing those messages up to the client, that's where SignalR gets really good. You know what I mean? It's okay for you to miss a couple of ticks on a Dogecoin chart. It's not okay for you to miss the order of 1,000 new coin. You know what I mean? It's like, and I just ask people, you know, think about that durable question. Like the joke that I make on stage is, if you're using SignalR, if I was using SignalR to like manage state in a shopping cart, the one order that was $100,000 order is the one message that would get dropped out of the last 1,000 messages. You know what I mean? So just think about Brady's luck. Like, don't do that. And if you do it, make sure you're putting durability behind it. So,
it's a common question. Why would I use SignalR versus like a REST endpoint? Or some sort of API endpoint. It's like, well, it depends. At least I know with the REST endpoint, I'm going to get back a 200, 400, 500 something. And I have a safer guarantee that that transaction occurred. With SignalR, I send the message up, and you know, sometimes I can get a result back that the message made it there. But after that, I don't know what's happening. It could error out, but I never get that response.
Right. You talk about that in the context of like what customers are doing. You know what I mean? Like I was alluding to, you know, like sometimes people see SignalR. I did it. You did it. Everybody does it. You sig SignalR and you go, okay, I have the hammer to put every screw in I ever need to screw in again.
Yep.
That's not how hammers work. You know what I mean? Like you have to think about SignalR as an Uber hammer to solve a specific problem. That problem is pushing messages from the server to the client.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when you talk about things like iHub context of T,
Yep.
you know, you can put that into the constructor of your web API controller. And whenever you get a message coming into the server, you can use iHub context of T to bounce a message back out to the client. You could use SignalR to do both, but that's not what it's for.
Yeah. Pick and choose your messages, make them as small as possible.
Right.
And the other thing I like to say, and I'll do this in a video, I've done this in blog posts, never trust the client state. So the client is never trustworthy.
No.
If you miss a message, do a resync every now and then, or even the server, if it gets a request, it needs to double, triple check that request before it does anything.
Yeah, exactly. You talk about small messages. We had a customer ask us at one point. They were going through some of their experiences building a system that would provide. Let's just say that they had one day a year where one website would get 6 billion hits.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so they really needed it to be in real time, and they needed it to be in real time now. And then not tomorrow. Like, you know, like think about like, you know, your Black Friday sale or something like that. It was worse than that, but like that, you know what I mean? So we were asking questions like, well, it seems like a lot of memory usage. Like these numbers don't make sense. Like we're trying to like go through like analyzing what's going on. And finally, I think it was Andrew. He goes, how big are your messages? And the guy's like suboptimally large. Andrew was like, how big are your messages? 380K. He goes, don't do that.
Yeah.
So, like, don't do that. Could you get them down to like 3K? So, you know, don't send 380K messages. And then when you think about things like, you know, if you are using the service shards. So like if you send it like bigger than, I think it's 2, I can't remember what the size is, but if you send it a message bigger than I think 2K, it'll shard it into 2K size to just like optimize performance. So you want to keep your messages small so it fits in that 2K spot.
And then charge you for it.
Yes.
I talk about that in the video. Yep.
It's an important thing to know. Like you get charged for throughput, you know, period. You know what I mean? Another good example. There's I'll just say I think it was an airline, but they have, I don't know if it was an airline or a shipper or what, but we were talking to one customer and they said, we have a scenario where like there's a system people use that kind of takes over when they get to port or they land or whatever. And like, there's another system that gets them there. Once they're there, we need to clean and send crew on and do this and restock and whatever else. This system does it all. And we were like, how many people use the system? And they said, worldwide, 6,000 people. And I went, that doesn't sound too bad. Like, I'm thinking like Kevin's like, I could do that in a weekend, you know, like, okay, well, they have a 30 megabyte download on first hit for all the data that we preload. And then they basically don't hit refresh until like after lunch or, you know, like a couple times a day. It's essentially like a large application that runs in the browser. I'm alluding to something here. I'm getting to somewhere. It's a large application in the browser. And then after the app loads, everything else is SignalR. So it's super fast.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a canonical use case. And they said, yeah, we know, we love it. It's going so well. We don't have any problems. We don't have any throughput. I was like, what's your payload size? They were like, oh, it's under like 2K. I was like, there you go. Like, that's the way you do it. You know what I mean? This is the way. So that was a different type of call. You know what I mean? They were like, we're pretty sure we can scale this to like 50,000 users. It's like, with no changes? They said, no changes. So that's, you know, you hear both versions. You know what I mean?
We had a similar issue, one of my clients, where the way we did it initially was bring down all the JavaScript stuff, go, then SignalR connects. All right, let's go get an initial state. but initial state was probably like 50, 60K. I mean, it was, I think at one point like 100K. Just depends on what was going on.
Well, these guys were like 20 and 30 megs. Like they were downloading the world.
Yeah. But still, even with, if you have, small payloads, like let's say 100K of data comes down, that's not a insignificant amount of time. Like that's a blip where you are, flash of like unstyled content, basically.
Right. Yeah.
You just have nothing on the screen. So I went through and did a revision where we pull that initial state down basically in this HTML when the page originally loads. So you have a instant data, and then as soon as SignalR connects, SignalR goes and says, I am 99% sure my state is out of sync. Let's do some syncing and make sure we're all on the same page. Then everything after that is deltas. Deltas after the fact, and they're sent on demand. So that page could just live for half an hour and never get an update. Unless something happens. And then sometimes I'm getting 10, 15 updates a second, just so much is happening.
Right.
You
said Delta, but that's not a hint. It wasn't Delta.
No,
I do know that.
No, Delta's the changes in the data.
Right. Yeah.
But that's fascinating. And it's all recommendations I've made, and it's all lessons we've learned the hard way. I think as a community, it's like, all right, maybe that sounded like a good idea. That's not a good idea.
Oh, exactly. The only thing we haven't really talked about is like, have your customers or your students or clients asked for like what we're doing with 6? Like, is that kind of come up at all yet?
It's on the tip of some folks' tongue. It's on the tip of my tongue because I mean we're a couple months away from it. So we are. What do we got to look forward to?
Let me do a quick screen share. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Desktop 2. There we go. So you see my browser window? Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
There it goes.
Yep, we got it.
Please tell me you don't see Teams. So this is, if you look here, themes.net. And I believe, pretty sure this is public. If you can go to it and it's public.
It is, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, you're good. But a question a lot of us get is like, what are you doing for the next release of .NET? If you go to themes.net, this is literally a great site that I think Emo built, and I love the way you did the UI, on top of all of our GitHub stuffs. So this is literally what like we're working from. So you'll see like epics and stories and like whatever else. So if you're into the ASP.NET stuff, if you were to expand this part, you can go and you can like look at all the different things that we're doing in ASP.NET. Another area in which I'm working is if I go right here and expand on meeting developer expectations. One that I'm working on quite a bit is right here, because I'm working a bit with the Power Apps folks. Like, we basically want to enable, folks who are building, you and I used to build intranets. I think when we met, I was working for the Virginia government, and had a lot of intranet stuff. If you'd had Power Apps back then, I can imagine a lot of people that have intranets would have probably been using Power Apps on their phones. So what we want to do is enable ASP.NET developers who are building APIs to, get those APIs decorated or outputting like open API specifications so they can easily be ingested into Azure API management and then into Power Apps. So that's this is where Brady spent the last year of his life. And then this is all the stuff we're doing. You see here Blazor. You talk about internal customers that are built on top of SignalR. Don't forget every Blazor app is a SignalR app. You know what I mean? Because Blazor makes a good component of it. That's kind of that ASP.NET Core layering that we do of our, we build our own Lego sets with our own Legos. So that's something to think about. In this API space, I'll pull up David Fowler's Twitter here. This is actually something that I'm extremely excited about. In the future, we're going to have this concept of minimal APIs. And if you look at this, in this number of lines of code, David has actually produced a RESTful endpoint that would actually output, a dog object, essentially. And it had to be a corgi because we have a lot of corgis in the team. But this is essentially what you would do instead of file new controller, web API, action attributes, and all that stuff. So this is fun. You know what I mean? You could essentially build an entire set of APIs inside of Startup CS or Program CS. So
you cut out the ceremony.
Yep.
I think those of us who have been doing ASP.NET for 15 some years, we're just used to the ceremony. But someone coming to ASP.NET 4 for the first time, it's a lot to explain. All right, we need a project, get your startup CS. Okay, now go create your controller.
Yep.
All right, what's a controller? All right, let's stop for a second. Let's go down that line of thinking. I think this Fluent interface, it's very synonymous with Express, like Node.js world.
It totally is.
Easy Express app. It looks like that.
It does. It does. It's the same level of simplicity. And you'll see David. Pardon me?
With the power of C#.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And David and other folks like talking about this a bunch. So I would just follow, all of us on Twitter, kind of watch the hashtags and all that stuff, because you'll see us kind of percolating more information about this stuff in the future. Because it's just now getting out there, you know what I mean? But I love this new API structure. I actually borrowed, when we first started working on it, we're actually pretty deep into working on it. I pinged Steve Smith and I said, hey, I got something I want to show you, because Steve's got the API endpoint stuff.
Yeah.
And, Steve's such a gracious guy, you know what I mean? We got together and we talked about it, and I showed him some of the tests that Halter has, going. Halter's just working so well on this. He's like killing it. And Steve took a look and he goes, that's cool. I'm really happy that, we're all thinking the same way.
Yeah.
And just to tell you how cool the guy is, you talk about people who come up with this project and then they own it, they own it fiercely. Steve was like, if this is better, we can just work together on it. He's like, I just want this for the community, you know what I mean? And I'm not like possessive about my stuff, but it's just great to see that, like, between Steve's stuff, the Carter project, which if you haven't seen, I'd encourage you to take a peek at, and then the work that we're doing, we're definitely moving in that, more simple, definitely an easier API, kind of funk driven, which is nice. Yeah. But this is it. Like that's all you need. You don't need a model class and anything. You have a record and you're off and running. So
that's great. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to teaching it. That's going to be the kicker.
Yeah.
But Brady, I don't want to take up more of your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I think everyone out there is going to enjoy this. And so if you're watching, you're not in SignalR Mastery, go join SignalR Mastery right now with almost 500 other students. We'd love to have you. Brady's in the course. Like Brady's
I'm in there now. I'm actually in there now.
Yeah.
I was auditing it.
Hopefully I'm not teaching you anything you don't already know.
No,
but
there's actually two things that I've already learned from your course that I'm like, oh, I glossed over that when I was like refreshing myself in 2018 again. So yeah, it's good. It's good. The closer you are to the project, the more you think you know about it and the more you learn. You know what I mean? It's kind of good.
But all right, Brady, I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for watching.